just want to echo Emily's thanks to people who worked on this, Bernard and other people. It's a labor that we thought would never end, and we're not entirely convinced it has ended, or even at this moment. I want to look very quickly at some of the way some of the questions raised by the dictionary may play out when we look at a single word, and the single word in this case is justice. One of those big words that make us so unhappy, as Stephen Dedalus said. It doesn't seem to be an untranslatable word, justice. Not even in Barbara Cassin's brilliant sense of the word untranslatable. What she means by untranslatable is, she says, this is a paraphrase, not that which we can't translate or don't translate, but that which we can't stop translating. We just have to keep at it. Okay, this is what ce que n'en finit pas de ne pas traduire is what she says. But in fact, the word justice, which seems as if it is easily translatable, raises all kinds of questions, even at the verbal level, without getting into the actual material question of whether there is such a thing as justice and whether anybody practices it. And I have three distinct literary examples I'd like to evoke for you quickly. The first one is, and they relate to the dictionary in sort of decreasing directness. The first one's very direct. This is, absolutely directed to what the dictionary is up to and what it is about. What does Ivan Karamazov mean when he speaks, at least in Constance Garnett's translation, of justice? At the moment, he uses this word several times. He's evoked a horrific set of narratives all about cruelty to children. And he's about to tell his brother the tale of the Grand Inquisitor. Ivan insists that what he wants in all of these conversations, what he desires, what all this is about, these stories about, is justice. The word is возмездие. Возмездие, which means all kinds of things, as words often do. That is, возмездие means justice, but also requital, retaliation, payment, recompense, and even nemesis. Pivert and Bolokonsky, in their translation, decide on the word retribution rather than justice. So do other translators use retribution, but we're somewhere in the space then between justice and retribution. In context, I would add, not out of my knowledge of Russian, but with my feeling for what I think is going on here, my non-existent knowledge of Russian, that is. To me, it suggests he means something like closure or satisfaction, in the way one might mean get satisfaction from a duel, say some sort of ending of the story. Ivan goes on then after this to talk about harmony, which is clearly related to this idea, but he doesn't want harmony. He says, if the tortured children have to pay for it. I'll just quote him now, just so you get a feeling of what he's talking about here. I need justice, or retribution, satisfaction, or whatever. I need возмездие. And I need возмездие not somewhere and sometime in infinity, but here and now on earth. I want to see with my own eyes the hind lie down with the lion and the murdered man rise up and embrace his murder. I want to be there when everyone suddenly finds out what it was all for. The universe will cry out, Ivan says in his personal version of Psalm 119, just art thou, O Lord, for thy ways are revealed. The question then is not whether we can broadly understand or roughly understand this argument. I think that's not too hard to do. It's complex. We can get our heads around it. The question is, can we get our heads around the full range of ideas at work here and their interaction and the whole set? Can we get our heads around the deck of things that is going on here? We can, I think, but that act of comprehension, however we play it, according to its range or its tilt, will actually alter the argument itself. So there is an argument, there is no, as it were, paraphrasable argument outside of our interpretations of the full deck of meanings here. A second example is really weird, but I'm devoted to it for that reason, I suppose. But it involves the example of false friends, what I call faux amis, false friends. There's words that are spelt the same in two languages, pronounced more or less the same way, and mean something completely different, like place in French, place, square, place, or the word that Joseph Conrad always misused, deception, which means disappointment in French and deception in English and so on. The question here, though, is whether is between languages, is whether the French word justice means the same thing as the English word justice. For Marcel Proust, the chief meaning of justice is vengeance, organized vengeance or punishment. People doing justice or seeing that justice is done, making sure that people get their comeuppance. That's what justice means. I have a horrible feeling that's what justice means in English as well, but I'm resisting the idea. Okay, so I'm working on Jacques' model here, blaming the French for this rather than anybody else. But Proust is certainly against it. He says he has his narrator in the novel, so I had no feeling for justice. I have a little riff on this in the introduction to the book. But we can ask, I think, how a person can be against injustice, as Proust undoubtedly was, and against justice as well. One thing I would say is the whole of his great novel is a set of answers to this question, among other questions. But the novel actually will answer. You will find several answers to this question in the novel. Now, among these answers, this is the weird bit. Almost buried in one of the late volumes of In Search of Lost Time is a sentence that will not leave your mind once you've paused over it. It ends in this way. It ends evoking that relation which almost always exists in human punishments, and which means that there is almost never either a just verdict or a judicial error, but a sort of harmony between the mistaken idea the judge has of an innocent act and the guilty facts of which he is unaware. Okay. Qu'il n'y a presque jamais ni condamnation juste, ni erreur judiciaire, mais une espèce d'harmonie entre l'idée fausse que se fait le juge d'un acte innocent et les faits coupables qu'il a ignorés. Pretty wild, I think. You could go deep into this stuff. But see, skepticism about justice, which is part of this proposition, justice doesn't exist. Skepticism about justice was a reasonable stance in the time of Dreyfus, and has been a reasonable stance, and is, I think, a reasonable stance in many countries and times much closer to us, as Louis Begley's book on Dreyfus suggests. And the converse, a fantasy of displaced but unerring justice. There is almost never a judicial error. May represent not the sinister view that evil is everywhere, which is the standard interpretation of this. Is Antoine Compagnon and others interpret this to mean evil is everywhere, that's why the judges can't be wrong. But I read it rather as a kind of paranoid fantasy. That is the sinister view that not that it's everywhere, but the view that a non-existent God knows all my secrets. Okay. This is more than a little paranoid, of course, but then, we might want to recall here the Adorno's version in Minima Morale of the truism that even paranoids have enemies. What Adorno says is psychology knows that he who imagines disasters in some way desires them, but why do they come so eagerly to greet him? Wieso aber kommt so eifrig ihm entgegen? Das Unheil, the damage. Wieso aber kommt so eifrig ihm? Why do they come? Fine, we can deal with it, but why is reality so keen to help out this paranoid fantasy? And my last example involves the ways in which we may find several false friends within a single person, as when we take a single word in one language to mean quite different things. Just one word within English without any translation outside of the language. Here's a famous use a wonderful use of the word justice in English, which moves us powerfully, I think, by its directness and simplicity, and then leaves us with just what it is we've been moved to. In Yeats's introduction to his book of Vision, his extraordinary account of what the spirits taught him about history and sidereal time, in this introduction, Yeats reports that he's often been asked whether he believes in this stuff. Does he believe in, quote, the actual existence of his circuits of sun and moon? The answer is rather complicated and involves a kind of wonderful bit of having his cake and eating by saying that if as all men must be, I was overwhelmed in the midst of miracle, my reason has soon recovered. You have to sort of run that through your head a few times, that he's overwhelmed by miracle, but his reason's recovered, but doesn't deny the miracle. The reason was right. It's reasonable to be overwhelmed if it's a miracle. Okay, but the answer ends plainly and very beautifully. His final answer about whether he believes in these things is not yes or no. It's this, that they have helped me. There's these visions that the spirits dictated to him, the whole elaborate scheme, history and the stars. They've helped me to hold in a single thought reality and justice. Now, I've returned to this phrase a lot over the 40, 50 years or so since I first read it, and I've always thought I knew what it meant. I guess I still think I know what it means, but I'm shocked that I haven't been more shocked at the meaning. Yeats is saying, is he not, that reality and justice are ordinarily so far apart that only a vast otherworldly metaphysical system brought to you by the spirits who talk to your wife and yourself at night only that will allow you to think about reality and justice together. Outside of such a dispensation, reality is not just, and justice is not a reality. Is this what we think? Is this something we can almost casually accept? Where do we go from here?